Today, I'm going to talk about how Leostream fits into your privileged access management solutions. Obviously, there are a lot of different technologies that come into play when you're talking about providing privileged access management. So how does Leostream fit in? Well, basically what we provide is secure remote access with real-time tracking, and tracking and monitor is very, very important when you're looking at PAM solutions. Now, things that we don't provide are password management. You want to look for different tools for those kind of systems, or anything that has to do with locking down accesses that are on resources. But what we do give you is great technology for really satisfying the 5 W's of privileged access management when you're talking about hosted desktop environments, whether that be in the cloud, in virtualization, or on-prem hardware. So let's break down these 5 W's and talk about how Leostream can help. Well, the first one is who. Who is logging into your system? Who is allowed to log into your Leostream environment? And what types of credentials do they need to provide to authenticate? I'll show you in a demo coming up here all the different flexibility you have in authenticating users, identifying who they are, and then from there indicating what they're privileged to access. The next W is when. When can users log in? AD gives you some ability to block logins to corporate resources based on time of day. But now in Leostream, what you can do is you can limit and monitor access based on time of day to hybrid environments, whether that's in cloud, things that are on your domain, off your domain, whatever it happens to be. The third W is where. Where are users logging in from? The concept of locations in Leostream and changing what users have access to and when they can log in based on location is very unique to Leostream when you're looking at other remote access platforms. So I'll show you some of the controls that you have in Leostream to really just change the user experience, block them out entirely based on where they log in from. The next W, why? Why do people need to access different resources? This one's a little more esoteric, but essentially in Leostream, you'll build pools that model the different tasks that users need to perform, and these pools contain the different resources they need to access to perform those tasks. So really, by structuring your configuration of pools in Leostream, you know why people are accessing different resources based on the pools that they're connecting to. And the last one, obviously, is what. This is really what it's all about. You want to control what people have access to. And that's all about what Leostream does. So to show this and some of the features that Leostream provides that help satisfy these 5 W's, let me share my screen. All right, and now let's hide that guy. So this is the web interface for the Leostream Connection Broker. I'm going to log in as the main administrator. I'm not going to really show you much about the end user experience today. We're going to focus on features in the admin that allow you to kind of define these privileged access management rules. So let's go ahead and sign in. Let's type our password correctly so we can go ahead and sign in. May have to edit this part out. I don't know why my Okay, so here we are in the administrator interface. And if you haven't seen this before, essentially it's menus down the left. And what I always tell people when they're setting this up is just start here and set up and work your way down. So let's show some of the functionality that's specific to privileged access management. Well, the first, the who. Who are my users? Who is allowed to log in? This is defined through the different authentication servers that you'll set up in Leostream. There's a wide range of different authentication servers, both for single factor or for multi-factor, that you can integrate within Leostream. Many, many people use us along with their Active Directory servers. So here users log in via username and password, and then based on groups that they are members of an Active Directory, you can provide or deny access to different hosted resources that you're managing inside Leostream. But Active Directory isn't the only username password system that we integrate with. We do, if you are a Linux shop and you happen to have older NIST servers, you can use those with Leostream. And really anything based on Open LDAP, you can use as an authentication server in Leostream as well. One thing we've seen more recently as people have gone remote and zero trust is becoming a big topic is people are using their corporate identity providers and using that for the top level authentication server and using the SAML protocol to then redirect users into Leostream. In this case, I happen to have it set up. We use G Suite for our corporate systems. And so I can use my Google account to log into my Leostream environment. And then Google sends a SAML assertion to Leostream to log me in there. That's great for wrapping Leostream access into the authentication systems that you use for your other corporate environments as well. One last point to touch on for authentication is MFA providers. If you are using Active Directory for username, password authentication into Leostream, you still have options for MFA, and you have a couple. One, we do provide native integration with Duo. So you can use Duo push notifications as the second factor. They can type in their one-time passcode, use their little Duo app. That's using the native Duo API, but essentially any identity provider that supports the Radius protocol, you can use that for MFA as well. So here I happen to have integrated with Okta. This is just an open source Radius server we use for a test. Any system will work just fine, and that's great for the push notifications again, or the one-time tokens as the second factor. So many options for defining who. Now let's talk a little bit about what. What are you providing access to? The what in Leostream can be just about anything. In Leostream, we have this concept of centers, which are the third-party hosting platforms where you are hosting your different resources. These can be any of the major clouds, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform. We also support OpenStack. So if you're working with some cloud vendor who happens to have built their cloud based on OpenStack, or you're building a private cloud on-prem, you can use OpenStack with Leostream. Hyperconverged systems such as scale computing, virtualization vendors, just about anything you could possibly want, you can manage it in Leostream. And I say that because if we don't have native API integration with a particular platform you're using, all you need to do is put Leostream agents on the machines, and then they are categorized in the uncategorized desktop center, and then you can manage access to those resources through Leostream as well. All right. The setup section, that's where you're going to hook Leostream up to your external system. So you're telling us where you're hosting things, you're telling us how you're authenticating your users. And now in the configuration, here's where you're going to start defining access control rules that are going to help you control that why, when, where, and from where. Let's first start by looking at pools. Now I mentioned pools can kind of help you with that why. Why are people accessing different resources? In pools, what we often see is people will create pools based on the projects that users are working on. Maybe the projects require different levels of CPU, and so you can create pools based on CPU. The key in Leostream is that it's extraordinarily flexible in how you define your pool. So this allows you to really kind of model whichever kind of use case and workflow that you need to. After we talk about pools, the next W I want to touch on is the when. How do we help control when users have access to things? And not just when, but for how long? That's really where you start looking at the power, which is Leostream release plans. Essentially what happens in Leostream is after a user has been authenticated into the environment, and we determine what they have access to based on their policy, which I'll talk about here in a bit. When the user requests a connection to the desktop, now that desktop is theirs, and no other user will be offered that machine until the desktop is released from that initial user. When that release happens is determined by you and how you configure your release plan. And these are very flexible. If you look at the release plan, you see it's broken into these sections based on user events. Well, on your hosted machines, you're going to install that Leostream agent I talked about. The Leostream agent is monitoring the user's session. It's looking for, did the user disconnect? Have they logged out? Did they go idle? And based on those events, you can perform different actions. So for example, if the user is idle, well, for security reasons, if they've walked away from their machine and they've left it open, that's probably not a good thing for them to do. So you can say, let's lock the machine after some amount of time. If they remain idle, then maybe I want to disconnect the machine so no one could just go and try and guess their password. And then if they continue to be idle, I can just forcefully log them out. So this gives you a way of making sure that there's not connections to machines lingering there if the users are no longer actually using them. The release plans also give you options to release even after a certain time of day. So if you have users who come in on Monday and they should be able to use their machine until Friday, you can release the machine at midnight on Friday or whichever time makes sense for you. So again, really good at being able to control how long the user has access to something once they've been assigned to it. So if the release plans help you decide how long does someone have access, how do you decide when they get access in the first place? Well, that's done through the policies. The policies really give you ways to control not just the what, but the when as well. So just as an example, the policies in Leostream control what the user has access to, so pools. Here I'm saying I have one machine that I'm offered from the Windows Remote Boost pool. But when it comes to the when part, you can do that by using this offer desktops from this pool option. By default, pools are always offered to the users who have access to that pool. But you can actually do that even based on time of day. So now if you want to limit users to access particular resources only during business hours or during a particular project, then you can use policies to limit when they can connect, and then you use the release plans to indicate how long do they own it. So the next W to touch on is what? We haven't talked about, where. How do we determine where users can log in from? That's done through this concept of locations in Leostreams. A location, conceptually, you can think of as just a group of clients, just like a pool is just really a group of desktops. So what's in that location is really determined by you and the different types of workflows and use cases you need to satisfy. Anytime a user logs in to Leostream, we store a good deal of information about their client device. You see the information here, and you can use that to create groups of clients. So perhaps you create a location for on-prem because you know what the sitter is for your IP address range. And then you can block logins for anyone who's not coming in from that particular IP address range. So you have a lot of different ways that you can indicate who is allowed to log in based on these locations. And that is done. All of this comes together in the end down here in assignments. So here really this is where you're creating the final privilege access management rules. And it's done through your authentication servers. So if you remember in that setup section, when I started talking about authentication servers, I had 4 rows. They look just like these 4 rows. And in here is where you're going to build rules that indicate who is logging in. And by default, we look at group memberships for the different AD or Open LDAP or NIS authentication servers. If you're looking at using us with SAML, you can determine which SAML attribute you're returning you want to use to define who the user is. But based on who they are and where they log in from, that location, that indicates if they need to also pass through an MFA provider. And then if all of that is true, then the user gets a role and a policy, and that policy says what they have access to. The role, this comes into play when you're talking about privilege access management to this interface that I've been stepping through here. The roles in Leostream give you great ways to limit or provide access to not just pages in this interface, but to particular functionality on particular pages within the interface itself. Now, the thing to notice here, I've talked about how you are in a row, in a location, pass through MFA, you get a policy. If you fall through all of these rows, then you fall through to the default, and you can actually prevent login here. So this gives you a way of saying, nope, only users I put in particular groups. I have any, but that's probably not what you want to have here. Only users in particular groups get access. But you can even do things that say users in this particular group, they don't get a policy, so they have no access as well. So it really gives you a fine-tuned way to control who has access to what resources and when. Now, the last thing I want to point out is we did talk about how tracking is very important when you're talking about privilege access management. And Leostream is all about monitoring what is going on in your remote access system. You know, we're not looking at what users are doing on the machines themselves. We want to know who's using what. There you see all my failed login attempts. Who's using what? How long did they use it for? When did they log in? When did they log out? And all of that information is stored here on the logs page. And they can be exported as CSV files, so you can ingest that information into Excel to create reports and analyze it. We do provide some canned reports as well. And the information is just not here on the log page. In the resources section here, you have these lists that are basically everything that's being managed inside of Leostream. This happens to be all of my desktops. Here I have all of the users who are logging in. And every one of these lists stores a good deal of information. And you can decide what's important in there. I always find people find the desktops page to be the most interesting and really something that you'll monitor as your system's in use and in production, because here you can come in and monitor power states and monitor who's assigned. And again, I can come in here and look at different information, so I can see what's the last time somebody logged in, what's the last time somebody logged out. So it's a great monitoring tool. And with that, I think I will go back to my slides here. That was a lot of information. There's so much that you can do. If you do want to give it a try, we offer a free trial. You can contact us at sales@leostream.com. Thanks.